So now we're going to move on to our innovation talk, which is our guest is Chuck Roxin today, who's going to be speaking on that. And Chuck is he's been around consulting a while. He founded his firm in 1983. He is a CMC with our organization. Over the years, he's worked with every kind of business, from startups through growing firms, Fortune 500 companies, M&A, and other exits. Chuck has participated in all stages of those businesses, and prior to that, he held management positions not only in business, but in the not-for-profit and public sectors. He brings to these clients 3 decades of experience, perspective, and professionalism, and a keen sense of humor. So, Chuck, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you have the innovation talk for about 10 minutes or so.
Thank you very much, and I'll definitely limit it to 10 minutes. I'm going to share my screen now. Thank you so much for enabling that.
You bet.
And I was asked to talk about difficult clients with us and also give it a spin with a sense of humor. This is not easy. It's difficult. Clients are not always funny, but I'll give it a shot here. Anyway, because this is an inside the industry event, I'm going to be sharing with you events with clients that I would not normally share with the public, for example. Anyway, so very often we are in the crosshairs with a difficult client, and irony is actually the most frequent kind of humor that I've found in my consulting experience over time. First of all, I want to dedicate my remarks today to the man who introduced me to the concept of irony in consulting, and that is Russell Ackoff. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Russell Ackoff, but he was my mentor when I was in graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania. And also after I joined the IMC, he would make sure I was doing okay, and occasionally he even referred some clients to me. Look at that smirk. He was a serious scholar, but he also had an impish grin. My favorite view of Russ is his walking away from me, looking over his shoulder back at me, putting up his eyebrows and smirking. Anyway, he said to me one day, he said, "Chuck, you're very serious, but consulting can be fun too. Look for the ironic situation and keep perspective." And irony, of course, is, let's say, a consulting firm that can't manage itself. That's ironic. And there are some pretty big ones that actually fit in that category, but we'll leave that for the moment. A little bit about us. You heard some. I started in 1983 in Rochester, New York, moved to Seattle in 2002. We had a sales office on the West Coast for a long time. I do a lot of judging at the business plan competition at the University of Washington. I've been a technical advisor to 2 investment groups, and I've had a lot of university affiliations as well. This is just, and we're coming up on another year and a half. It'll be 40 years I've been doing this, and I'm not interested in retiring yet. Okay, let's start with, what is a difficult client? A difficult client for me, and you may have your own experience, they don't have a sense of humor, they're not honest, they talk all the time and they won't listen, they don't think there are problems. Even if staff is bailing and they're losing money, they'll blame somebody else for it. And they also misidentified both the problems and the solutions. You know this. What % of the potential clients have we had that say the problem is communication? Well, the problem was always communication. Well, maybe not. So what I often say to a client is, why did you ask me to come visit you anyway? What's going on? So I'm going to start with This woman here used to be my office manager. She was 14 when she came to the family, ran away from home, raised her, helped her through college, marriage, graduate school, and we were the real first-time job that she had. I hired her as my office manager. This, as you know, is Paris, and the business part of Paris is back here. This is the part that tourists generally don't go to. I wanted to show you this picture because, yes, Paris has high-rise buildings and it has an office section. Okay, here's what happened. We got a call one morning, 8:30 in the morning, and it was Shelley's strategy that if she got a call that was urgent, she'd throw her hand up in the air like a flag, and I was supposed to pay attention. Whatever else I was doing, I was supposed to give it up and focus on this. So she got this call, her hand went up in the air, and she started writing some things down. Then she turned to me and she said, "Chuck, you've got to take this call." Okay, the call came from the managing director of a chemical and pharmaceutical group in Paris. And he asked me the question, "Do you do consulting and training in communication?" And I said, "Well, yes, our firm does that, but why are you calling me? What happened before you called me?" And there was silence on the other end of the line. And then he said, "Well, this morning, our VP of production hit and decked our VP of research and development in the front lobby in front of clients and visitors." I'm thinking to myself, what is this? Is this for real? This is a global 500 chemical and pharma company, and his two VPs are getting into a fist fight in the lobby. Okay. So immediately I said, yes. Yes, of course, we can help you. I had no idea what the problem was. So Shelley held up a sign to me, and she had already faxed to the guy a plane reservation. This is in 5 minutes. She had me on a flight to Paris that night. So I left. He met me. I talked with him. I talked with other people. And of course, the problem actually wasn't communication at all. It was a conflict between these two gentlemen over who was going to have control over the production equipment. In a day and a half, we came up with a protocol so that the conflict was eliminated. And then we all went out to celebrate. Of course, I was hoping this was going to turn into a long-term gig. It turned out to be a day and a half gig. Anyway, so we went out to dinner, and we were joking and this and that, and the managing director gave me a check for several multiples of what I had asked for. He was so thrilled to get the problem solved. And then he said, and this is the punchline, he said, "You know, I'm really sorry, but we can't use you anymore." I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, the board of directors has a list of 3 large consulting companies that we are allowed to contract with. And you were an emergency, so we brought you in. But we have to use," and you would have heard the name of the company that they had to use. I'm not going to mention the name. So I looked at him and I said, "Well, you have a North American headquarters in my hometown." And he said, "Yes, that's true, we do." He said, "I'll tell them to use you." So that was the result of this difficult situation. Anyway, Shelley's just retired from her other job now. It's amazing how time goes. My second case, this is the case of the embarrassing embezzler. It's one thing when you embezzle. It's another thing to be a really stupid embezzler. So here's what happened. There's a family manufacturing business that was in Addison, Illinois, outside Chicago. They called me up and said, "We need some help figuring out why we're not more profitable." The father was the CEO, and he had just retired from being CEO, and he'd hired his daughter as CEO and his son as chief technology officer. Their net profit margin was 4%, which was pathetic. The industry average was 8%. So I went in there, did my tour, did my due diligence, looked at their books, studied them, and I said, this is ridiculous. They should be making more money than they are. I don't understand the numbers. So I was going to have to do something I hate to do, which was to make a presentation to them at the end of the day and to say, I have to come back. And they'll say, yeah, typical consultant flies in from the big city. By this time I'd moved to Seattle, flies in from the big city, and instead of solving our problem, he says we have to pay him more money, and I hate to do that. So I'm getting ready to do the presentation, and I go over to the whiteboard, and right down here on the lip of the whiteboard with all the markers is a thumb drive. So I pick up the thumb drive, I put it in my computer, I open it up, and lo and behold, there are 3 sets of financial statements. The one that I had been sent in advance that showed the 4%, the real one, which I could tell, and the third one, which is from which accounts money had been diverted to private numbered accounts. And I said, oh my God, the CFO has been embezzling money. And he left his thumb drive with all the data right here. Now, I should say that my company has had a licensed PI with also a license to pack heat who does forensic accounting, and nobody would ever guess it when they see her. She moonlights as a high fashion model. And when she comes into companies, she totally disarms everybody because she doesn't look like their stereotype of a private investigator. Anyway, she taught me how to look for things. So when the father, the son and daughter came in, I projected for them the 3 items, and they just looked at it, and I didn't have to say anything. All 3 of them burst out laughing. Then they started jumping up and down and hugging each other. They were so happy because their actual net profit after all expenses and taxes was 17%, not 4%. And the big question then was, well, first of all, the daughter said, see, Dad, we've been doing everything you told us to, and we made a lot of money. They decided just to fire the embezzler instead of prosecuting, which is what most companies do. Their lawyers said they'd lose customers if they did it. So that was nice. The client laughed.
So, Chuck, I have to ask you to sort of start to wind down because we got to have room for our inside track presentation coming up with Ken. So I just need to ask you to try to wind down here in the next few minutes.
I'm just going to skip to the very last one.
Thanks.
Less than a minute. Division VP believed he should be the next president of the company because his father was a founder, the entitled executive, I called it. His performance was terrible. We were sent in to approve efficiency and take a look at the staff, but also then I asked him the question, are you happy? Well, he's not, he said, because his wife isn't. I asked him why he wanted to be division president, and he said, well, because his father had been, and he was embarrassed that he wasn't, and his wife didn't believe in him. I said to him, do you want some private personal help? We had a licensed clinical psychologist on staff full-time at that time. This was in Houston. She was in New York. I flew her down that day. He decided to quit, got another job. This was very difficult, but he and his wife were all smiles by the end of a week of intensive therapy. That's it. I wish I had all day to share more stories with you, but that's it. I'm done.
Same here, Chuck, and thank you.
If you have questions, contact me.